tonight we're scheduled to go 6 to 8, so we might run a little late because we're starting late, but let's try not to. I think we're a pretty efficient group. We have the core thing on the agenda is that we have invited Brad James and Donna Russo-Savage to come chat with us, really to hear from them on how the law has changed or recent bills that have occurred. We have sent them at the last study committee meeting. You guys, I was not here. Ricky took the torch, and I appreciate that. It's unfortunate he's not here. You guys created a list of questions, and I believe that was also done with some folks in the public who were sitting. Is that correct? Yep. So that list was published in the minutes, and then it was also shared with Donna and Brad, and so they are ready to address those questions and also address the larger issues for us of Act 46 compliance and our process, because our process has definitely been changing over the last year or two because of changes in the law. So I'm going to actually ask that we adjust the agenda a little bit. I would like, usually we start our meetings with, oh look, we have signs. Usually we start our meeting with opening it to the public to speak, and then we also have it open up to the public to speak at the end. I'd like to propose to you guys that rather than do that, we hold questions and comments from the public in the beginning and do it at the end. And rather than have questions asked by the committee and the public, that you write them down, and then we will, while Brad and Donna speak, write them down, and then Beth will gather them and ask the questions for us. All right? So that's what we will plan to do unless the committee...
Does that mean we don't have a chance to ask a question of our own?
So what I'm asking, and it depends on the committee, is that people write the individual questions, the committee and the public, and they will be consolidated, and then Beth will read the questions. And then at the very end of the meeting, if there are lingering questions by anyone, we will open it to that.
Because I would like to speak to right after one or two of those.
At the very end,
Okay,
you will,
time.
that's what I'm saying, okay? Also, we have a slightly updated version of the articles, and so I'm gonna ask Ron to share those before we open it up to Donna and Brad. So everyone knows Chris Leopold was supposed to be here as well, and at the end of last week, he had a union negotiation scheduled for tonight. That is something he couldn't reschedule, and obviously it didn't make sense to reschedule our invitation to these guys. So let's start by approving the minutes, if there is a motion. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? So moved. A second? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? I'm abstaining. Okay, so everyone, okay. So I'm gonna pass the mic over to Ron.
Can I have a copy of the, please?
Yeah, I think I distributed all the ones I have. So I just want to go briefly through this. It's dated tonight, June 21st. A couple of changes on page 5 is the first change, and that has to do with Vernon. In the old articles, it cited the August 9th, 2016 withdrawal vote. So they're scheduled to have a withdrawal vote July 18th, 2017. Vernon Town School District will vote to withdraw from the Brattleboro Union High School to form a separate district. The withdrawal of the Vernon Town School District from Brattleboro Union High School District must comply with provisions of Act 49 from the 2017 Vermont legislative session. So that's, Donna may say that we don't need this in the articles, but we just had the old language and we just updated it. So, also on that page, many of the dates are changed. When you look at Article 4 and 5 to begin with, I think the old merger anticipated starting July 1, 2017. That's being put off. If Vernon's withdrawal goes through, there would be no change in their school district for next year, 2017-18. It would go into effect 18-19, 2018-19. So most of the merger dates would be pushed off to July 2019. When we spoke with Donna and the Secretary of Education and Chris Leopold, back whenever we did, those dates seem to make sense in terms of still qualifying for the tax incentives. So that's why those dates. You'll see throughout these sections, most of the dates are either June 30th, 2009 or July 1, 2019, I'm sorry, 2019. So no big changes other than those dates. One other change in Article 15, the local advocacy through school-based leadership councils. On Chris Leopold's advice, some of the bullet points were changed to make it more consistent and also fall in line with statute where I'm looking on page 10. Provide recommendation to the superintendent on budget development. That's kind of the process as it is now. The third bullet, make recommendations to superintendent and principal for specific practices and procedures related to district policies. That had been in there. The second to the last bullet, coordinate and review individual school performance data with the central, I think it says district office, should be the superintendent. And then this last one, provide yearly activity reports to the superintendent. And of course, all of that information is shared with the district board. So on Chris's advice, we made a modification. You know, I think through the AOE process and the state board process, there'll be recommendations for modifications on some of these language things. So that's about it. The rest of the document is what it's been as attachments. Frank Rucker, who could not be here tonight, did update the consolidated balance sheet FY16. I think the last one, the one that we have, is a year older, so I have these if anybody would like that copy.
All right, thank you, Ron. All right, let's move straight into the presentation from the AOE.
Well, this isn't quite the presentation because I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Brad James. I've been with the agency for quite some time. My official title is Education Finance Manager. I don't use it a lot. And basically what I do is my role is to implement and work with the legislature, business managers, superintendents, et cetera, so people understand what the funding formula is and how it's working, modeling for the legislature and such. And also making sure that it really works. And so taking budgets and doing your tax rates, which is what I'm in the middle of right now. Not at the moment, but when I get back, I will be. So that's kind of what my role is in this. I do the financial side of things, answer questions on that. I don't have a dog or anything to burn in this thing. I'm here to be factual as much as possible.
Hi, and I'm Donna Russo-Savage. I'm actually the point person for all of the governance activity that's going on around the state for the agency. I've given this little spiel to some of you already, I know, but I think it's really important for you to know what my background is and what my role at the agency is. I came to the agency about 1.5 years ago. Prior to that, I worked for 16 years for the legislature. I was one of the nonpartisan attorneys working for the legislature. And for the last 9 of those 16 years, I was the attorney who staffed all of the education matters. So if any of the 180 legislators wanted anything to do done with education, they came to me. If any committee wanted anything done regarding education, they came to me. If anybody wanted an amendment to anything, they came to me. So I wrote everything that would do something and everything that would undo something and everything that would do something different. So I was involved when the first kind of movement towards the governance that ultimately became Act 46 was put into place. So I wrote Act 153 in 2010 and all of the amendments to it and, everything that it eventually became. And again, every amendment that tried to get rid of it, and also wrote Act 156, which had some amendments to that and some additional options. That was in 2012, and then Act 46 as well. So my role throughout all of that, as I said, was nonpartisan. As Brad was saying, I didn't have, and I don't have anything that I was trying to accomplish. I was just trying to accomplish whatever it was that the legislator came to me and asked to have accomplished. When this opportunity became available at the agency to work on this, project that I had been very involved in at the legislature, one of the very first things that I made sure of when I spoke with the Secretary Holcomb about this is that my role would essentially be the same for the agency as it was for the legislature. I'm essentially nonpartisan. I'm not going to be telling anybody what they should do. I'm not, that is for you to decide how you are going to proceed. But what I am going to tell you is this is what the law is now. And that's all I can tell you. I'm not going to tell you, and how it applies to you now, I'm not going to tell you how you should act under the law. That's for you to decide. And I think that's really, really important to know, because I'm not going to debate whether Act 46 is a good law or a bad law, because that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to tell you what the law says. So if any of you have things that you want to say about why this is a horrible thing to do, if you'd wait until after Brad and I leave, that's great, because we really don't, we have no power to change it. We just implement what's the law. And it'll just be using up time that can be spent on answering questions. So I'd really appreciate that if people would try to keep it to the factual side while we're here. So we did get this series of questions. There are two that I'm going to kind of try to answer together and go off topic a little bit as I do so. So one of the questions was, are there other structures that would better serve students and communities? That was number one. And then number 7 is, does the AOE see alternatives that apply to the WSESU under the new law, Act 49? Act 49 is what the legislature just enacted. Some of you were following it first as S-122, and then it became H-513. Ultimately, when it was enacted, it was called Act 49. So I'm going to put those two questions together about options, things that might serve you now and things that might be available or different under Act 49. And the way I'm going to start it off is just talking about the options that I see given your structure and where you are now. So under the options, I think that there probably are, excuse me, I've got hair in my mouth. There probably are 4 main options that I can see. One is that the study committee could propose, and the districts could vote on, a unified union school district, a pre-K through 12 district with one board, multiple schools going forward as a single unit. Another option that you could have would be you could make a proposal for a unified union school district and have, as part of that proposal, be a fallback to a modified unified union school district, which many people call MUDS. That would allow a no voting district to maintain its elementary school district, and all of the yes voting districts would be pre-K through 12 members of the new unified union school district. So let me just explain that a little in case there are some people who aren't familiar with that structure. If this second option were to go forward, and there were a majority of districts that voted in favor of creating a pre-K through 12 district, and there was a minority who did not vote in favor, then a new district would be formed. That district that voted no would be a member of the new district for whatever grades it currently is a member of your union high school, and it would maintain its union elementary school district separate and apart. And then all of the yes voting would be members, pre-K through 12 members of this new district. So the new district would be pre-K through 12 for all the yes voters, and I'll just say 9 through 12 or 8 or 7 through 12 for the no voter. So that would mean that there would be two districts. There would be this modified district that represented different grades depending upon the town, and then there would be the Union Elementary School District for whichever district voted no. So that's the second option. The third option in your particular situation is that the elementary school districts could decide, like 3 of the elementary school districts could decide to form a Union Elementary School District. That would be another option. So you would have a Union High School District, you'd have a Union Elementary School District, and you'd have, a single town elementary school district. That is an option that is out there for you. The fourth option that I see is that you present a proposal to the state board that you want to stay the way you are, and that is an option. You can present that proposal to the board. Act 49, there are 2 things that it changes for your area. The things that most districts and the media has looked at are the different kinds of flexibility, different kinds of options that are available for structures that can be created or proposals that can be brought forward, such as there was one called a 3x1. There's another one called a 2x2x1. They really don't apply to your situation. They were developed. I was not at the legislature very much because I don't work there anymore, but they weren't developed for your kind of situations. They were developed for other kinds of situations, and they don't apply to your situation either because of your union school district membership, current union school district membership. The 2 things that do apply to you are those first 3 options that I mentioned, creating either a unified union school district, a modified union school district, or a union elementary school district. One of the changes in Act 49 is that rather than having to have a vote of the electorate by July 1st, that's favorable by July 1st of this year, that deadline has been extended to November 30th. So there's a little bit more time for you to get your ducks in a row if that's the way you decide to go.
You said November 30th, 2017.
Yes. Oh, and that is what I meant. Is that what I said? Oh, okay. Okay, good. Okay. So there is a little bit more time for that if that's the decision that the study committee decides to make that proposal to the voters. The other thing, very obviously, that has changed for you is the special exemption that was put in for Vernon to be able to withdraw unilaterally from the Union School District. And as I understand it, it was put in place because Vernon has a very, very unique situation that was created by the legislature. And probably, I think that there is concern that it probably isn't constitutional, and the legislature is trying to help the situation change by giving them an exemption to get them out of a situation that the legislature got them into in the first place. So that is what the law is. The law now says that Vernon can unilaterally withdraw, and I understand that there's a vote scheduled for July 18th. So that definitely changes your situation. If that vote is successful, then that means that you are a group of districts that all have exactly the same structure. You all are pre-K through 12 operating just in different ways. So as far as what is the best structure, are there structures that are best suited to you? That has to be decided by the study committee first. What you think is, after looking at all of the options, looking at the data and the analysis that you've done and any additional data and analysis that you will be looking at and doing, to decide, what is best for you. Once that proposal is made, if it is to advance a merger proposal, then it's up to the voters to be deciding, is that the best thing for us? And then ultimately, especially if that is voted down or if it never comes to a vote, then it would be up to the State Board of Education to make that decision based on all of the information that it has before it. And I can talk more about what that might look like, what that process looks like later. There are 2 things that I think are really important to know. One is that merger by itself isn't going to advance the goals of Act 46. The goals of Act 46 are educational, both equity and opportunities, and their fiscal and transparency goals. So it's educational goals and fiscal goals. Merger in and of itself is not going to change it. What merger can do in certain circumstances is create more flexibility so that it is easier and there are more options for communities to address those goals together. And again, I'm not going to debate whether it's the right thing for you and whether it's the right thing or not, but that is what's behind Act 46. The second thing I would point out is that your particular structure, once Vernon is gone, is very much the structure that the legislature was considering every time that it enacted any of those laws that I mentioned. Act 153 of 2010, Act 156 of 2012, and then Act 46 of 2015. They were talking primarily about a number of elementary school districts that all operated schools that were all members of a union high school. And that in those particular situations, that was the structure that the legislature believed would be most likely to benefit from this. So I'm not saying that that is the best thing for you. I just think it's important for you to know that your structure is what the legislature talked about most often when they were talking about this. And again, you may have a very different situation. You may be able to show, very, very different things of why this doesn't apply to you. I just feel it's important for you to know that. And most of the mergers that occurred most quickly were exactly what your situation is about operating elementary school districts that all fed into a union high school. So that deals with both questions 1 and question 7. Does AOE have any concerns about the report and the Articles of Agreement? We just received this tonight. We know that the new version, so we haven't had a chance to look at it, and we also haven't had a chance to haven't looked at this version in the earlier version in a very long time anyway. In great detail. We definitely would want to look through this again with great detail and talk to you again about things that you may or may not want to consider. We definitely want to see how you are going to be dealing with the Vernon situation, because that has changed things, and whether you're going to be including the option of a MUD as a fallback or not, and how that goes forward. Let me just see, I did write down a couple of notes. Dates, obviously, are going to have to be decided. Once, I think the biggest thing, and it's not a concern about this at all, it's just that you all need to decide how you want to proceed, and that's the main point. When it's final, we will, and you feel like it's final or nearly final, we will be happy to go through it again with a fine-tooth comb. I think that the only thing I would change, and this is not a flaw in this at all, it's just that every proposal can always use more expansive explanation about the kinds of things that you've considered, more expansive references to the data that you've considered. And again, I'm not criticizing this report. I'm just saying that every report can use more of that. Specifically, what it is what data you were looking at and what you're thinking about when you're making this analysis. Because I know that study committees and communities put a lot of time and effort and conversation into all of this. So to the extent that all of that can be there for the state board to review, it's great. So that is question 2. 3, can the AOE provide a timeline for meeting with the State Board of Ed, its review of the report with articles, and its decision? So the way, for those of you who haven't been involved in the process, the way that it goes is that usually there's a lot of back and forth between study committees and sometimes the study committee's consultant or the study committee's attorney, and primarily me also, Brad, especially if it gets into financial issues. And we go back and forth with different concepts and different data that's been presented, and different versions of the report. And we notice tiny things like we're both just totally type A, and we notice all kinds of stupid, picky little things with commas and stuff that nobody else cares about or notices, but we will point out those things. But then we also look at the big picture and at the details and things. So I can envision that, especially since there will be some changes because of Vernon, that there will be some going back and forth still with whatever you have. In order, if what you are planning to do is be eligible for the tax rate reductions and other transitional assistance, either as a unified union school district or a modified school district or a union elementary school district, you do have to have the vote of the electorate. before November 30th of this year. So really, I think that if you were to shoot for the September 19th state board meeting, the state board always meets in the third Tuesday. Sometimes in the summer it's different, but they always meet on the third Tuesday of the month, and this year in September, it's September 19th. Then 10 days before that, we're required to get everything to the state board, all of your final documents, plus the secretary's recommendation, and we write the draft of the secretary's recommendation. So I don't have my calendar with me, but it's like the Friday that's like 10 days before Tuesday the 19th. We would have to have everything absolutely final to be able to be sent to the state board at that point, so they had sufficient time to review it, which means that we have to be pretty much final. Oh, thank you. So the 9th, we would be sending everything out to the state board by the 9th, which means that, to the extent that we could be basically finished by the end of August, that would be great. We probably could be doing a little bit of back and forth with some tiny details in the couple of days after Labor Day, but if we could be done before then, that would be really great. I do know that there are quite a few proposals of various sorts that are coming before the state board in September, which means that Brad and I have to review everything ahead of time to these. So to the extent that we can get things done early, that's always really helpful. But anyway, if you did present at the September 19th meeting, what happens at that is that the study committee representatives come to the state board meeting, make a presentation. There's usually a small PowerPoint that the state board will have looked at, will have reviewed and had 10 days to review your proposal and all of your background information. So they're very familiar with what your proposal is. To the extent that you can talk to them about what your particular situation is and specific challenges, specific strengths, those kinds of things, and kind of ground them in what's, where you think you're going. And then there's an opportunity for questions and answers. The state board has the ability to ask for additional information. So far, they have not, and I believe that it's probably because of the amount of back and forth that Brad and I do in advance. Because by the time, we want to make sure that by the time the secretary makes a recommendation to the state board, that all the I's have been dotted and the T's have been crossed, and the state board has the information that it needs. It does have the ability to ask for more information, which means that it could potentially ask you to come back, but so far they've never done that, which means that you probably would have a decision when you walked out of the state board meeting on the 19th, which then would give you plenty of time to warn it. Even if you wanted to have a November 7th vote, it would give you enough time to do that. I'm just going to put one here. Okay. The next question is, can the school leadership councils be strengthened? Can we provide stipends? I'm not, and I probably should have checked about this in advance, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by can the community leadership councils be strengthened. I think one thing you're going to have to be very careful about, and it's something that you would talk about with your lawyer, is just making sure that you're not creating the school leadership councils to be unelected school boards. So you just have to be careful about what their role is and how helpful they can be, and they can be very helpful, but that they're not just, de facto school boards who haven't been elected. But I think that as long as that line is carefully drawn, then you can give them whatever roles you think will be helpful, and both for the community to be able to be involved, and also helpful to the school board to have the information that it needs to make the decisions it needs to make. As far as stipends, that's just for you to decide. I don't know of any reason that they couldn't be, although that's again something you probably want to check with your lawyer about. I don't think that there's any reason they couldn't be compensated. That would just have to be something that was included in the budget and the voters approved as part of the budget. But again, those details you might want to check either with the School Boards Association or better with your probably with your own attorney. This is an important one. Number 5, can the AOE clarify which articles can be changed by the unified board and which require voter approval? The way the statutes, which have been in place for decades and they govern your current Union High School, are written, say that articles of agreement can be amended, are amended by only the voters if the provision is very specifically either referenced or laid out in the warning itself. So if there's an item such as closure of schools or, the existence of the council, something that you want to make sure that only the voters can change, then you just need to talk again with, you said it was Chris Leopold, you need to talk with Chris about how to draft your warning so that those items are among the numbered items on the warning. If there's an issue that is not specifically referenced or quoted in the warning, and it's only, the warning always has a final article that says, and the new district will be otherwise governed by the articles of agreement that are on file with wherever it is it's on file. If the only time that it gets pulled in is through that, then that's something that the school board can change by a majority vote unless you change it to being something more than a majority vote. So it's very possible if there are things that are really, really important to you that only the voters can change, it's very possible to draft the warning in a way that ensures that that happens. There are other things such as whether or not votes are by Australian ballot that by law can only be changed by the voters.
Can we interject and have Ron address that issue? Take the microphone. Oh, sorry.
I talked to Chris Leopold. So I talked to Chris Leopold recently, and I'm just going to walk through the articles, number 1 and 2. I believe that's on page 4 and 5. So these are the ones that cannot be changed by the board. It would have to be warned for the voters. So number 1 is the necessary forming districts. That makes sense. Number 2 would be the grades to operate. Number 6. Some of these other ones are bound by statute, so.
Right, I was going to say that
yeah.
Article 3,
Yeah.
you have to follow the law.
Yeah.
That's,
So,
yeah.
right.
Nobody can change that one.
Yeah. So 6, capital debt, surplus, all of that. The board couldn't change that. Restricted funds. Article 7, real estate, property, school operations. Again, couldn't change that. Could not. I'm reading the ones that the board cannot change.
So 6, I thought the board couldn't be board.
Could not. Could not. Sorry. All the ones I'm referring to now could not. I have a circle next to those. So, real estate, school operations, you'll remember that we put in the school closure information. That's section D on page 7. So that can't be changed by the board, cannot be changed by the board. 8, 9, the board of directors composition and the board of directors terms and elections, those cannot be changed. So if somewhere down the line, people want to change the makeup of the board and the terms, you'd have to follow the statute, but the electorate would have to vote to change that. 11 and 12, establishing a unified district and operating authority, and forming school districts cease to cease to exist. That cannot be changed. Cannot. All of these are not. And then 14, vote by Australian ballot cannot be changed by the board. How about what? 13. He didn't mention this one, but I think it, well.
I think you could probably talk with him about, could there be some, I'm not sure about this, and he's obviously the expert in elections law, but I think if you could probably draft the warning in a way that pulled those in as well, if that was something you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Can you address 15?
Yeah. So 15, he said, the board could modify it, and he gave this explanation. The board would have to vote to modify Article 15, warning 30 days in advance, public hearings, and require you have a unanimous vote in that article. So it would be pretty difficult to change that. And based on the sentiment of the study committee, that's an important element of getting input from the different towns. So he felt like that would be a tough thing to change. That's what he told me.
Next, since we're taking a quick break, can I remind folks that if you have questions, to write them down, and Beth will be reading them in several minutes. Then we'll have those addressed, and then towards the end of the meeting, we'll open it up for any lingering questions or comments. So do start to hand your questions to Beth if they're ready. But go ahead. Thank you. That applies to you, to the committee as well.
So the sixth question was, can the AOE provide a list of outcomes that the state is looking for and any metrics on the same to date? So the broad general outcomes that the state is looking for are those items that were listed as goals in Act 46. As I said before, they're fiscal and they're educational. The educational involved both opportunities and equity. The fiscal involved efficiencies and transparency. So those are the kind of general categories. Part of the reason I believe that the legislature didn't put in specific metrics to meet is that every district and every region and every SU is different, and every district and SU and region has different strengths and different challenges and different ways that it either wants to go about addressing the challenges, or that it has to go about addressing the challenges for whatever reason. So there aren't specific metrics because it would be really trying to, compare apples and oranges in a lot of cases. It just, it wouldn't be fair to try to come up with metrics that were the same for everybody. Rather, I think that really what it is evaluating yourself where you are, and then showing ways that you can improve in those categories, and in what ways will whatever it is you propose be improved by what you're whatever you propose be improved. One of the problems that was always coming up with the legislature this was back when I was working there and Brad was coming in and testifying with data to the legislature, the legislature would often ask about, well, can't you compare this area to this area? And he would say, no, we can't, because their structures are different and the way they're doing things is different, because in this particular case they're operating pre-K through 6, and then they're part of a union school district for 7 through 12, and the way everybody is being hired and the way things are being reported, and that's really when the apples and oranges comes around, is because you really can't compare. The other thing that comes into play right now is that because some of the districts are so tiny, the data can't be made public. So there are a lot of places where data just isn't public. We don't know how well they're doing because it can't be made public. So one of the things that the legislature saw as a benefit of having at least more districts that are merged into larger units is that there would be more districts in the state that had a similar structure and could be compared. And I think that that's when we'll start to see the metrics come out, is when you have more units that are the same and are all working towards the same goal and all trying to improve whatever their current status is, and then you'll really be able to compare them because they'll be comparable at that point. Before we get on to the questions that have been passed up to you, there was one other thing that I just think is important, because the questions were asking me, because we were talking about the Articles of Agreement in particular and presenting those proposals, but because one of the options is to present a proposal that says we want to stay the same, I just want to talk really briefly about what that would entail. That is not a study committee, that is a school by, it would have to be after this. It's a school board by school board proposal, although school boards can work together. And the thing that changed in Act 49 is that it said that rather than those proposals being due on November 30th of this year, they would be due on either 6 months after the alternative structure rules were final or January 30th, whichever was earlier. We've all just been sort of going with the January 30th is probably what the date was going to be, but those alternative structure rules will be final and actually in place this coming Monday. So the actual formal deadline for the alternative structure proposals is December 26th, but, and I've been saying this pretty openly, I think we're probably going to be pretty flexible about if they came in a little bit later than that, it would be okay, because everybody has been sort of going with the January 30th deadline in their head. But the kinds of things that districts need to present when they want to stay as they currently are exactly the same kinds of things, and they always have been ever since the rules have been being discussed at the very beginning, are exactly the same kinds of things that the study committee looks at. It's self-evaluating your ability to meet the goals as an individual district, having conversations with other districts about how you can work together, and then coming forward with a written explanation of how it is that what you're proposing is the best thing for your students and your taxpayers.
Hold on. Beth is collecting questions. So just write it down. So are you?
I just wanted to make sure that I got those dates out there and what that process is.
Actually, what I need is just a clarification on what you said.
Okay.
And that was at the beginning of 6, where it says outcomes. And what I thought I heard you say, but this is what I think needs repeating, is that the state expects that after consolidation, at some point after consolidation, whatever outcomes there are then would simply be some sort of at the higher levels of the same outcomes that they expect. In other words, there are no new outcomes.
Well, there are outcomes as far as, for example, the education quality standards and meeting the education quality standards, which every district is supposed to be either meeting or working towards meeting. The education quality standards, which have, there are those, those kinds of things are measures out there. What I meant as far as there are more metrics are, is there aren't specific metrics that when you bring your proposal to merge to the state board, you have to say, when we merge, we are able to have, all students score X on some particular test. There aren't metrics like that. What it is you recognizing where your challenges are and where your strengths are and how you're going to move forward. Right.
It was the first part about outcomes.
And I might have just spoken very sloppily. I'm very tired, so I'm sure that I spoke sloppily.
All right. But you said education is something standard?
The education quality standards, right, which is something that all schools now are expected to be meeting or working towards meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So Beth, I'm going to ask you to articulate the questions. Then I think these folks can't stay till 8. They've got to be back up north, I know. So I think what we'll do is have Beth ask the questions, then ask if there are any lingering questions by the committee, ask those, then the public can ask their questions, again, if there's anything lingering, and then you guys can take off, and then our last agenda item is figuring out how to move forward, so sort of generating agenda topics for our next meeting. Does that work? Okay.
And I guess I would just ask again that if there are comments, if you start to get to the comment phase, then maybe just let us go once you've gotten past the questions.
And we can also have comments, so 2 cycles of comments for the public. All right, thank you. Yeah, you do. So,
Yeah, either that or there's one more microphone that Andy's been fine too, but for right now, yeah.
Question 1. If one town, for example, Dummerston, votes no on consolidating, what happens to Dummerston?
That would depend on what the proposal was. If the proposal was strictly for a unified union school district, then all members would have to say, all members of the current Union High School District would have to vote yes in order for it to go forward. So if in that situation, if it was just a unified union school district, then that's pre-K through 12, then if Dummerston voted no, the proposal would not go forward. And then it would go to the state board. Ultimately, the state board would be looking at everyone when it creates the statewide plan. And at that point, the state board could say, you know, we realize that Dummerston voted no, but looking at all of the facts that have come before us, we agree with them that they everybody should stay apart, or we really think everybody should merge. And then whatever the state board decides at that point is what would happen. If you had the second option that I had laid out, the unified union school district with the modified fallback, if Dummerston voted no, the other towns would all be pre-K through 12 members of the new district, and Dummerston, what is Dummerston currently? 8, okay. So Dummerston would be a member of the new district for 9 through 12, because that's what it's currently a member of the high school for, and it would continue to be an elementary school district for pre-K through 8 in its own town elementary school. And I will let you know that there is, again, though, the possibility that if the state board believed that you should merge into the pre-K through 12, it couldn't force the modified district to accept you, but if the modified district voted to accept you, it could force Dummerston to merge into it and become a pre-K through 12 member. If a union elementary school district was formed, you could name all, is it 4? Without Vernon, it would be 4. All 4 of the all 4 of the towns, and name all of them as advisable, or name Dummerston as advisable. If Dummerston was named as advisable and was voted no, then the Union Elementary School District could form with the 3 districts that said yes. The Union High School District would remain as it is, and Dummerston would remain as a pre-K through 8 elementary school district. So you would have 3 districts. You'd have the Union Elementary School District with 3 members, you'd have the Union High School with 4 members, and you'd have the Dummerston as a pre-K standalone town district.
I think that you've answered this next one, but if the merger vote fails in WSESU, will the state impose its own merger requirement?
Yeah, I have no way to guess what the state board is going to do. I'm not a member of the state board. And even if I was, I'd have only 1 vote. We have 2 new members of the state board. By the time the state board has to create the statewide plan, we're going to have an additional 2 members whose terms will be up, and we'll have new members appointed. But I will tell you that the way that Act 46 is written, it says that to the extent necessary to meet the goals, the state board shall merge districts and redraw SU boundaries. So if the state board determines that it's necessary to meet the goals, it would be required to merge the districts.
If a school should close within a unified district, would the unified school board have sole discretion on how the property is used or sold?
That's addressed in your articles, what happens depending upon, if I remember right, if it's an elementary school district, it's offered to the town first, I believe, and for $1, right? And if I don't remember what happens with the Union High School District, though. Maybe one of the board members will remember what happens with the Union High School District. I don't remember what. No, it's a subsequent sale of Brattleboro. The school board can sell it on the terms and conditions it decides. Yeah. So if it's one of the elementary schools, then the town has a right of first refusal for $1.
The term incentives continues to be used even though the secretary has said that they should be considered transition costs. Could you elaborate on the effects of accepting these incentives and the tax rates after year 4?
Sure. The incentives slash whatever you want to call them, tax rate reductions, other people call them other things, bribes, things like that. Those are really designed to help with the cost, because at this point it's not necessarily known what the costs are going to be, but it's helped to get people to start thinking about it, move and start moving forward. What is going to happen is, as you probably all know, they step down. They started at 8 cents off and 642, and then in year 4, it's whatever the tax rate happens to be for that unified union district or that modified union district, or whatever the case may be. What will it be doing at that point? I don't know. If I knew, I'd be happy to tell you, but I don't know, because generally speaking, costs tend to go up, populations tend to go down. If I recall quickly glancing through your data, your populations, well, let me put it this way for you guys, your populations are going down. If you don't have a corresponding significant decrease in your expenditures, the tax rate will go up. That's really just kind of the reality, because tax rates are based on a spending per pupil figure. It's a little bit more complex than that, but that's what it boils down to. So what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years, I don't know. What I can tell you is, by having a larger district, is not that you guys are particularly small districts, but we talk to a lot of districts that are small. It will protect from spikes for certain year, for a couple kids moving with high costs, or a couple kids moving out, or something happening, a roof blows off or something like that. It tends to kind of modify things a little bit more, so the tax rates tend to be a little bit more stable over time. Well, I mean, what Donna's whispering in my ear here, in case you didn't hear it, was, do I want to talk about some of the things that have been going on with some of the districts? Essentially what they're finding is they're finding more savings than they anticipated in general, not every case, but in general. What we haven't done, and we need to do, and that's one of the things I need to do later this summer, is start canvassing everybody, because we've really only had 3 Act 46 mergers go through this is their first year. We had another 2-district unified union go through also this is their first year. So we don't really have that body of data that we want to get, and we're trying to get that. We have, I think, another 7 or 8 going through starting on July 1 of this year. So we're going to start picking up more information. So what we want to do, though, is start talking to people, seeing what are their problems that they're running into, what are the solutions that they're coming up with for those problems. What are their unanticipated costs? Where are their unanticipated savings? What are they seeing happening? So everybody wanted information yesterday. Unfortunately, we're in our real first year of it at this point. There have been 2 other mergers that are unified unions in the past 4 or 5 years. No, I think Mountain Towns Red did it I think the first year was FY 2014. Yeah. And then there was the modified union district in Chittenden East, up in Heinsberg, not Heinsberg, pardon me, Jericho, Richmond, that area. There was not a significant change for the Mountain Towns Red. They were the first ones to go. And the reason for that is because it was 4 towns that sent all of their elementary kids, pre-K through 8, or K through 8 at that point, to Floodbrook Union Elementary School. They all went to the same school. And then after that, the 9th through 12th graders pretty much all went to Burton. So the only thing that really changed in that situation was they went from 5 school boards to 1. The kids still went all to the same school, K-8, and then went to Burton. So there were not significant changes there. There were some minor savings in terms of audits and things like that. However, Chittenden East, which was 5 school districts, I think? No. 5 school districts, they merged, and they're a modified district because, as Donna mentioned earlier when she was talking about modified unifieds, Huntington decided they did not want to join with everybody else. So Huntington, it still operates its own K through 4. I really mean pre-K when I say kindergarten or K, but they operate their own up through 4th grade school and still belong to Mount Mansfield for grades 5 through 12, which they did beforehand. The other school districts joined in from pre-K through 12, so they're a single district. So Huntington makes its own decisions for grades pre-K through 4. Everybody else makes their decisions for grades pre-K through 12. But in that situation, what they have found at Mount Mansfield, in both the elementary side and the secondary side, is they have found unanticipated savings. And they're going, I can't tell you how much they are because I don't remember. Is it a tenth of their budget? No, absolutely not. But it's anywhere between the $300,000 and $700,000 range. That is annual and ongoing. So what they're finding is things are happening. And again, this is the type of information we need to start gathering now that we've got a year under our belt with these other 3 places, and start getting that information out to people, because I don't know the answer either. I wish I did, but I don't.
If Vernon votes to leave the SU in July and the proposed merger is defeated, then within an alternative governance structure, such as a supervisory union with member districts, could Vernon have the opportunity to rejoin the SU and still maintain their school choice?
There's a difference between an SU and a union high school. Merely by withdrawing from the union high school, it does not necessarily withdraw from the SU. So if Vernon had a no vote, it was if they withdrew. If Vernon withdrew, if there was a no vote on the merger and you made a proposal to stay as you are, Vernon could definitely stay in your SU. It would just be a district that operated pre-K through whatever it operates and pays tuition for whatever it pays tuition. If it decided at some point in the future that it really wanted to join the union high school, it would have to decide whether it was going to actually join the union high school fully and send all of its kids there, or whether it was going to pay tuition for its kids, because it can't do both the way that it's currently doing. But as far as being part of the SU, that wouldn't be an issue.
Chris Leopold has been our study committee lawyer and is now the lawyer for the DOE. Is this a conflict of interest? This is a question that was also asked at the last study committee meeting.
He's not a lawyer for the DOE. He's been retained. The State Board of Ed does not have any staff. We staff them, but a few years ago, the legislature created this very awkward situation where the secretary now reports to the governor instead of the state board. So, and we work for the secretary. So there are situations where the state board might be wanting to do things that perhaps the governor doesn't want to do, or doesn't want to do them in a certain way. So my understanding is that for certain particular issues, and it has nothing to do with any of the mergers, the state board has retained Chris Leopold to advise them on those particular issues. I'm not an expert. I am an attorney, but I'm not an expert on conflict of interest things, so you would have to, I don't believe that there is one, and I know that our legal office is very careful to, to be checking things out before they advise this, so I'm assuming that they checked into it. I believe well, actually, I'm not going to go any further. But at any rate, I don't have any reason to believe that it's a conflict of interest.
Article 9 of Act 46 defines an alternative governance structure as essentially what we are now. If we work together to improve if we work together to further improve now, can we present this to the AOE, and can we work after the deadline to further build our own program?
I don't know what you mean by further build your own program, except just like do whatever you're doing now in a better way. You definitely could propose to the secretary, and then it's ultimately the state board that makes the decision that you are going to stay as an alternative structure, an SU with multiple member districts. As I said earlier, what Act 46 says to, I can actually read it to you. It's in section 10.
This is why I came to hold the microphone for.
So the way that Section 10 is structured is that for the Secretary's proposed statewide plan, it gives certain parameters, and then it says that when the state board creates the final statewide plan, it has to follow the same parameters. So this is actually in the section that's talking about the Secretary. But it says that the Secretary will prepare this proposed plan that to the extent necessary to promote the purpose stated at the beginning of the section, which is to have sustainable governance structures that meet the goals. So that to the extent necessary to create sustainable governance structures that meet the goals, the plan would move districts into the more sustainable preferred model, which is the merged model. If it's not possible or practicable to develop a proposal that realigns some districts where necessary into one of those merged districts, then the proposal may also include alternative governance structures as necessary, such as a supervisory union with member districts or unified union school district with smaller than average daily membership. So the Secretary first in her proposal and the state board in its final plan are charged with, to the extent necessary to meet the goals of Act 46 in a sustainable way, they are required to merge districts except if it's not possible or practicable. So, and actually there's another part in section 8 that says that the state board shall approve the creation, expansion, or continuation of a supervisory union only if the board concludes that this alternative structure is the best means of meeting the goals set forth. So yes, you can present that, and you can put whatever kind of data that you want to put, to support that, and whatever arguments you want to support that, and definitely whatever proposals you have about how you are going to stay in as member districts of an SU. That will continue to work together, even though your individual districts will continue to work together, and what particular details you have that you'll continue to improve together as individual units, but working together. Definitely put that in a proposal. When that proposal is submitted, the Secretary will be talking to the school boards making that proposal. The state board will be taking testimony. There'll be opportunities to submit additional data if something comes up during the conversations or the testimony that you say, oh gosh, we have this other data that can show that, and let's show you that. I have no idea whether you can show that that is the best means of meeting the goals. And that's what you're gonna, that's what you have to do is ultimately the Secretary and the state board are required to merge districts if it's necessary to do so in order to meet the goals.
And this next one, I think you've answered, but could we keep the current SU but change the way that we handle equity and problems to be the same way that we currently handle special education?
That actually is a little bit different. Special education was required by statute to be, special educators are required by statute to be hired at the SU level. And there would be a lot of, first of all, it's not authorized in statute that the SU can hire all of the other teachers, or special teachers or whatever. Those have to be hired at the local level. But also, I think that it would create problems that you might not be thinking about. Is that the more you have being done at the SU level, that's not a budget that you directly vote on. That's a budget that is allocated to you. You only directly vote on your local budget. So you would not be able to vote on, if the SU started to have more authority to hire, all of the teachers. That would just be an amount allocated to you. You wouldn't have the right to change that. So I think that there are both. First of all, it's not permitted in law to do that, but also I think that there might be repercussions that you might want to think through before you did it. That being said, in your proposal, you could talk about other ways of working together, and there might be other ways that you could work together, other than that.
Would you recommend that this study committee hold public hearings, such as this one, to further clarify to the public the options in Act 49 that are relevant? If not, does that mean that the clearest way forward for proponents of alternative governance is to simply vote no on the proposed merger?
I guess there are a couple things going on there. One is that there really aren't any other alternatives for you in Act 49. You have extended deadlines, and because Vernon can leave unilaterally, it actually makes it easier to move towards a merger. There aren't other options. There aren't other options with alternative structures for you. So that's one part of your question. The other thing is that public meetings are always a good thing. I don't have a list before me of how many public meetings there have been, what opportunities there's been for public engagement. Having the community involved is an important thing. So I think that the community and the study committee are going to have to decide whether more are warranted or not.
Can a school board refuse to warn an article that goes to a MUD?
Okay, so the way that a MUD is created, as I said before, is that it is a proposal to create a unified union school district that has a fallback as a MUD. The only way that you can have a fallback as a MUD is if, and I'll use Dummerston because I think that this is where the issue is Dummerston would have to be named as, let me just back up, because I don't know where everyone is with this. When the articles of agreement are prepared and presented to the public, the study committee names certain districts as necessary districts and certain districts as advisable districts. In many situations, what that means is we could not be a sustainable governance structure unless these necessary districts say yes. And the advisable ones in many situations are, it'd be really great if they joined us, but we would be okay without them. In a situation where there's a MUD, that's the mechanism that's used to allow Dummerston, for example, to vote no, and it's still to go forward. So what could happen is that the other three districts could all be named as advisable, but Dummerston would, but more likely they'd be named as necessary, and Dummerston would be named as advisable. The reason I'm telling you this is because if a district is named as advisable, it's up to the school board whether it's going to warn the vote at all. However, if 10%, I think, and I can find that, it's either 5 or 10%, I'm pretty sure it's 10%. If 10% of the public comes forward, of the electorate in Dummerston come forward to the school board with a petition, even if the school board said, no, we don't want to warn this, we're not going to warn this, if there's a petition of 10% of the voters, the school board is required to warn it.
I'm not sure that you can answer this question. It might be for the study committee, but does the study committee, does a subcommittee of the study committee have any alternative structure proposals?
That's definitely something to talk to them about after we've left.
Will future amendments to 706N can they be retroactive to articles of agreement entered into prior to the amendments?
So this is new legislation.
If there is new legislation. Okay, so 706N says, that's the one about amending, who can amend the articles of agreement, whether it can be done by the electorate or done by the school board. First of all, I've never, for what it's worth, I've never heard of anybody intending to amend that.
It's in Act 49.
No, it's not.
It says here on page 16, on or before January 15th, 2018, Vermont School Boards Association and Vermont Superintendents Association, in consultation with the agency.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay, no, this isn't about amending this. This is totally about if there is a state, let me answer this question first and then I'll answer what your question was. So anyway, I've never heard anybody talking about that. Also, just from my experience of working for 16 years for the legislature, they're very, very careful about not changing anything for anybody by making things retroactive. So my guess is that the answer is a no. I mean, I have no way of predicting what's going to happen in the future, but my guess is that no. What your question is about, if districts have not merged and the state in the statewide plan, the State Board of Education requires them to merge, there will not have been a study committee that has put together articles of agreement. So one of the things that Act 49 says, is that the State Board is required at the same time that it issues the statewide plan, for any of those, not the ones that have merged on their own, but any of the ones that it requires to merge, it's going to issue default articles of agreement that will be something that they can use until the voters themselves in that particularly new merged district vote to change them. The reason that is put in there is, first of all, there's not a process in place because this is something totally new. So the legislature asked the agency and the School Boards Association and the Superintendent's Association to come together and present a proposal next year that they can actually they can debate and then amend and put into law. But the other thing is that, and then this was actually something I realized and I brought up with them, is that I realized that there would never be anything that the electorate had initially voted on. Let's say that the electorate really liked whatever the default articles of agreement are, and they don't, or they don't get around to amending them or whatever, and they just decide to go along with the articles of agreement for 10 years. They would never have voted on those, so there would never be any provisions that had been warned and voted on by the public that could only be changed by the public, which means that every single article of agreement in a default article of agreement could be changed by the school board. And I said, is that really what you want, or do you want them to be able to, some things to only be able to be changed by the electorate? And they said, oh yes, that's what we want. And so I said, okay, so when we're off figuring out what this process is, what about if we figure out how to make 706N apply to those kinds of situations too, and we'll present some proposals. So that's what it is. It's actually, that was put in there to make sure to protect the situation that only the voters can change certain articles.
So, but we have to be watchful of future legislation to make sure it's not retroactive? Because it's
No, it isn't. It wouldn't be retroactive. It's only that is only applying to when the statewide plan comes out, and there are default articles of agreement that then might be changed at some point in the future by the particular district. It's not for anybody else.
So our expectations for our articles are governed by current law, even if that current law changes in the future.
That's the way it is with any law. I mean, the fact that
Yeah, well, it's a little scarier when you see something in an act that says it could be changed in the future. So it's just hard so that we know what we're talking about. This gives this body of unelected people a lot of power to change a law.
who has the ability to change the law?
It says here Vermont School Board.
Yeah, they asked us to come forward to think about how 706N, which talks about amending articles that were created by a study committee and voted on by the electorate, and certain of those articles can only be changed by the electorate, how to come forward with a proposal to the legislature for a process to make that applicable to a situation where the state board is requiring merger and handing out default articles.
So, but that's subsection A, right? And that addresses the plan. I'm worried about subsection B.
Right, subsection B, which is what page is it on again?
It's on page 16.
I'm going to ask Donna to address that comment, and then we're going to go back.
Yeah, I'm just saying, this is not an unelected body that's creating anything. They asked us to try to come up with something that was fair because they realized that the electorate might be disadvantaged by articles that are or default articles. They asked us to try to come up with a way to make sure that only the electorate would be able to change certain of those articles. We have been asked to come forward with that proposal, tell them what we think might work. They're going to debate it. They will take testimony about whether or not that works, and it will only apply in situations where the state board has, whatever it is they adopt will only apply in situations where the state board has required a merger, has issued default articles, and at some point in the future, the electorate wants to make sure that they are the only ones that have the ability to change certain aspects of those default articles.
Okay, there's two more questions.
Thank you.
The first one, in Article 14, there will be one budget, but is Australian ballot required by law instead of a vote at each town meeting, with those vote totals being commingled?
Well, there wouldn't be different town meetings. There would be one town meeting. No, it's up to the electorate to decide whether it's going to be by Australian ballot or whether it's going to be a floor vote. But there would be, because it is one district, there would be one district meeting. It wouldn't be separate district meetings all around the, all around the district in each town. If it's by Australian ballot, then each citizen of Dummerston could go to Dummerston, and each citizen of Brattleboro could go to Brattleboro, wherever their polling place is. If it's done on the floor, then there would be one, annual school board meeting in one central location, and that's where that would be decided. But whether it is done on Australian ballot or on the floor is totally up to the electorate to decide.
Last question. In the event of a MUD, how would voters understand the financial models they are committing to beforehand, as well as the board makeup, if the final makeup of the unified board is not known when the vote is taken?
The makeup of the board is known, because what happens is, everybody has their own, and in your particular case, you are voting on members from each town. Each town is presented the way that it's presented here, except for the two that are at large, if those are still there. Every town has a certain number of seats on the board, and only those town members vote for those seats. On the first day of, on the day that you vote for the merger, you are also required to vote for those board members. If a MUD is created, those towns that had that voted yes and are pre-K through 12 members of the district, the board members that they vote into place represent them for pre-K through 12. If, for example, Dummerston votes no, the board members that it voted in represent it for 9 through 12 on the MUD board. It's just what grades they represent. It's the same people, it's just what grades they represent. Does that make sense, or do I need to explain that again? Is that okay? Okay. Exactly. So, for example, if Dummerston voted no and a MUD is created, and the modified board is talking about the elementary school, and there is a vote on the elementary school, then the Dummerston's board members would be recused from that vote because they would be voting on their own elementary school budget or decisions.
So what we're going to do now, thank you for all the great questions. I think, what, two-part question, the financial. Oh, the financial thing, right.
So if I recall, the financial thing was how do you know what you're voting on? Is that kind of what that question was? Yeah, in these votes, you're not voting on a financial model per se. I think what would happen is that if you and what I've seen in other people's study committee reports is if they think that there's going to be a MUD fallback and has a real potential, that they would model whatever that was going to be, saying here's what would happen if everybody said yes, here's what would happen if one town chose to say no. And I've seen some where they've had 3 towns they weren't sure about, so they've run multiple models, which really confuses folks. It's easier when there's just one town that thinks they may say no. It's a lot easier to model and less confusing for everyone. But when it's multiple, I think what to do it properly, and this is from my perspective, I think what you need to do is you need to model the various scenarios so that people do see what the outcomes will be. Because if you have 4 towns saying yes, then that's one outcome. If you have 3 towns saying yes, then you've got 3 towns with a different outcome and another town over here with another outcome, and it's going to all change depending on who it is. So I think it's beneficial and behooves you to do those models.
So what we're now doing is opening it up to the public if there are 1 or 2 lingering questions. And then we'll open it up to the committee. What? Right, so we're gonna, can the folks in the public who have a questions, so 2, 3, okay. So you and then Jody, because I know you had one in the beginning, and then Richard, and then who on the study committee has questions? No? Okay.
So I have a question for you, Donna, and that is that if we vote down, and this would include Brattleboro too, as well as Dummerston, vote down the preferred merger, then an alternative governance structure is possible. It didn't, when you were outlining what would happen if we voted down the merger, you didn't outline clearly that that is an alternative, that the voters, the school boards could then say, it's been voted down, we want to go for
That was one of the 4 options, yeah.
I didn't hear that. It
Okay.
was raised later, and so I just wanted to underline that
Yeah,
indeed.
you can, I'm sorry, was there a question from that, or just that, is that true?
Just that indeed, even if we vote down the preferred merger, that's a way of showing that that is not possible or probable.
No, that's showing that that's not what the voters want. But then it will be up to the school boards to come forward either individually or together with a proposal for an alternative structure.
Exactly.
And the state board to look at all of the information before it and make a decision. So,
Great.
well, technically December 26th, but as I said, we'll be more flexible about that. But, you know, you're absolutely right. But the probable...
Probable, practical,
yeah,
possible.
those kinds of things. Yeah, that whether or not I mean, certainly the state board is going to take into account that it was voted down, but that's not the only thing they're going to be taking into account. They're going to be taking into the data and the other arguments that they've seen.
Sure. Thanks.
Sure. You're welcome.
Jody Normando from Dummerston. Hi, Donna. And Brad. First of all, I want to thank Donna for being very open to questions from people. And I think Dummerston has sent her a lot of questions and kept her quite busy. My question, first of all, it seems like from the information that I've been getting throughout the state that there are about 102 school districts that are looking at alternative mergers. I think 9 of them are looking at it through the SU lens, and others are looking at it individually, and there are some in that process who have just turned down the vote and are thinking that as to where to go. So there's a whole lot of districts in the state that are not happy with this merger proposal. But my question to you is, if and when the alternative mergers come to the state board, would you be willing to help promote them as well as you've been helping promote the merger votes?
First of all, I don't promote the merger votes. I help the districts and the study committees have the... I ask them a lot of questions about, well, what do you mean by this, and what data do you have, to try to help them state their case as clearly and as thoroughly as they can. And yes, I'm expecting that when they start coming in, and it's gonna trying to figure out how it's gonna work is gonna be difficult, because there's only one of me, and if each district decides to do it itself rather than as a group, you know, we're going to have to see how that's going to work. But yeah, my assumption is that when those come in, just as when the merger proposals come in, I'm going to be working with the school boards and saying, you know, I don't really understand where you have the backup for this, or what do you mean by this, or, you know, those same kinds of things, and also saying that you've got a typo on page 17, which is something I also do, but yeah.
Well, quite frankly, personally, I would rather work with the supervisory union on an alternative merger and still keep our local boards. I feel very strongly in this day and age, particularly nationally and everything else, that it's very important to keep our democracy.
This sounds like I'm not making the decision.
I
I'm just
know,
saying I'm happy
I know,
to work with you. So please,
but-
please wait until I'm gone, because Brad has a young child actually whose babysitter is going to go fairly soon, and we've got to get home.
Well, anyway, that was my question to you, because you are
That's
going to
what
be
the
faced
intention.
with this.
That is what the intention is because the analysis that's being done for mergers is the same as the analysis that should be being done for alternative structures.
Say goodnight, Jody. I have a follow-up to Spoon was asking earlier, and it had to do with outcomes. And I know that I wasn't so concerned about metrics, and I know those because districts are so different that they can't. I'm Dick Firks, just from Dummerston.
Yep,
by the
I know.
way, sorry.
Can you hold the microphone?
Okay, sorry. How's that? And what Spoon was asking, I thought, was about outcomes, how districts that have merged. I read and saw John Alberghini's testimony this year in which he said Mouse Mansfield has merged long enough to realize that they haven't been able to close performance gaps and they haven't saved any money. Now, I don't know what the $600,000 or $700,000.
True, but
Well, look at his testimony. Anyway, so it made me think that it was consistent with what we have read and learned about other districts, not only in Vermont, but in Maine and West Virginia, Oklahoma, where they have consolidated, but haven't really been able to save money
so I can
or improve performance.
right, and I can respond to that. This goes back to what I said. You can merge and take advantage of the flexibility that's there, and have the potential to see educational opportunities and equity increase and fiscal stability and fiscal savings, or you can merge and just decide to have businesses usable but with one school board. So I think part of it is a question of the intent that's behind it. The other thing is that I don't agree with your representation that they haven't seen. I don't recall about the achievement gap, but I know that that's something that all districts are struggling with. But I know as far as fiscally, they have seen unexpected savings, and I know that there were unexpected savings in other places. But I think part of the problem is that even though there have been a number of mergers, most of them, only a couple of them are operational so far, and those that are operational are in their first year. So it really, being able to see those things at this point is not
I'm not
possible.
just talking, I'm talking about the concept that bigger is better, and that's what the state.
And that's an argument about the value of it, and I just don't want to argue with you about the value of it.
Okay, but I'm just saying you were commenting about the fact that merging was leading to savings.
No, I said that merger itself does not lead to savings. Merger can give flexibility that, if used, could lead to savings depending upon what is decided to be done.
Right.
That's what I said.
Okay. I just want to follow up with one more question for Donna, and that was, now I've forgotten it. Okay, in a MUD. If a proposal is presented as a unified union school district with a fallback, and I don't quite understand why that can be a fallback if you're voting on a unified.
I can be a fallback because that's the way that the MUD was created. It was created in Act 156, and it said if a study committee presents a proposal for a unified union school district where there are separate elementary school districts that all feed into a union high school district, and a majority of the elementary school districts vote in favor of it, but a minority votes against it, and the minority was listed as advisable, and it was clearly stated in the warning that this would be the fallback, then a MUD would be created. It's just the way the law was created. That's how it happens.
So if two towns in a unified union school district vote with a fallback to a MUD were to say no, then the MUD couldn't go forward.
If there were 4 districts voting
Yes.
and 2, no, it has to be a majority say yes, and all of the ones that are necessary have to say yes.
Right.
And a minority says no, and only an advisable one can say no.
Okay, in the case where the 3 schools. This is the last question. Yeah, okay, thanks. this, where three school districts were to merge, and one would say no and was advisable, what happens then if they're, to that district, what are the downsides financially, maybe programmatically? How does it change? Can they stay the same and do what they're doing, raise the money to?
You mean for their elementary school?
Yeah.
They stay in elementary school district, assuming that the state board allows them to stay in elementary school
What
district.
changes that? I mean, what decides that?
What decide? It's going to be the state board. Wait, I do know at least part of it. So let's assume that it goes forward. They go forward. Let's say a MUD is created, and the Dummerston Elementary School District is a Dummerston Elementary School District. It continues to go on exactly as it is. It has its own budget. It hires its own teachers. The other schools in the other elementary school districts can share resources and can share teachers and hire all of the teachers for all of the schools. Dummerston would continue to hire and support only its own schools. When this goes to the state, when the state board is looking at the statewide map and trying to decide to the extent necessary to create sustainable governance structures that meet the goals of Act 46, thank you, it will be looking at the merger proposal. It will be looking at the Dummerston Elementary School Board's alternative structure proposal that would be submitted around December 26th that says we want to stay the same and this is the reason we should stay the same. It'll be taking testimony from the Dummerston School District. It may be asking for testimony from other places. It'll be looking at other things, and then it's going to decide what it thinks is best. It does not have the ability, would not have the ability to require the MUD to accept the Dummerston Elementary grades, but it could say to the MUD, will you accept the elementary grades? And if the vote is yes,
Right.
Then it could require Dummerston to move, and it would be a pre-K through 12 member, and it would no longer be a MUD, it would be a unified union school district.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for coming. Brad, thank you.
So Donna, if we do the whole vote, if I'm following this correctly, the vote alone does not determine it? The state board? If we do a vote and we come up with the MUD and Dummerston's out, that's not the end? The state board has to make...
Well, the state board has the ability to require merger of a district that is not a pre-K through 12 merged district. So for purposes of that law, the other three towns would be part of a pre-K through 12 district in the MUD.
3 towns are done, that's done.
Right. The MUD is done because it is pre-K through 12 for the 3 full members. Dummerston, however, the elementary school, the pre-K through 8 town board would not be a merged district, and so it wouldn't, a pre-K through 12 district, and so it would not be exempt from being required to merge under the statewide plan if the state board believed that merger was necessary for all those reasons.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Ron to speak to a question, an issue, and then I'm going to ask, I don't think any of you guys had any questions? Okay, so.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand first.
You did not.
Could I just ask one quick question?
If it, yeah. And that's it.
Can you hear me all right?
It's the only way that it gets on the camera.
Okay. I'm sorry. Hi, Paul Normando. Hi, from Dummerston. Thanks, Donna. My question is, there are a number of communities who are struggling at this stage throughout the state with merging and have voted down different mergers. And are approaching an AGS system, alternative governance structure. My question to you is, how do you think the politics would be for the State Board of Education to force mergers among not just a minority of schools, but a large number of schools throughout the state?
I have no idea politically, but I do know that what the legislation says, and the legislature requires the state board to merge districts to the extent necessary to create equitable governance structures that are sustainable, sustainable governance structures that are equitable. So I know what the state board has been required to do. It would only be conjecture about what's going to happen when and if it does it.
So I guess I would like to make a statement that the study committee, along with the school administration, the central office administration, has done a lot of work to identify the program overview of all schools and also program opportunities. It's in our study committee. I know many of you have seen it in the past. You know, the program overview identifies schools in our district. We do have a great school district, but there's many students that are not getting equitable programming based on the services that we have now. And the other thing, so in terms of metrics or data collection, we have that in our document. And I think the AOE has looked at this, the Secretary of Education has looked at this and said, this is compelling data. The program opportunities show us, especially with special ed being consolidated, a savings that we didn't expect and much better services for our schools. And some of the smaller schools that could not afford step services or the special ed interventionists, we can afford that now at a savings about $300,000 over each year for the last 2 years. So again, if you take a look at this documentation, you see opportunities that a single district can't do. We've tried to do this, and you get to a point where the tax base is so high that you can't function. And so I would not ignore what the study committee has done over a period of about 2 years looking at this data.
I wanted to thank you guys so much for coming. And I want to just thank you guys. Thank you for coming, and have a safe drive back. And we will note, you'll be getting an email from me, no doubt, with other questions, follow-up questions for our next meeting. We're very happy. Yeah. Thank you. What? Oh, yeah, take some cheese. So guys, the rest of the agenda is pretty simple. We want to figure out what our next follow-up meeting. I suggest that we have a meeting as soon as possible, because if we are going to aim for a September meeting up north, then we need to get everything to Donna and her office by, as she said, end of August. And we will want to, while chances are good that the articles are reasonably solid for where we want to go and might need to be adapted to some extent, to some small or large extent, we will definitely want them to be we would want them to be going back to boards. So I'd like to actually start by suggesting that we finalize a date for the next meeting and then determine what we want to see on the agenda. Does that make sense? And I do know that Lyle, I believe, is available the 11th or the 12th of July, 10, 11, 12, which are Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Can everyone take a gander at their schedules right now to see which of those 3 nights are possible? You would prefer not Tuesday. Can I suggest we try for the Wednesday? Okay. Okay. So we'll figure out where that's going to be. And let's, without spending too much time on perhaps what we want, why we want to put things on the agenda, why don't we discuss what topics we want on the agenda? All right.
Can I?
Yeah.
So
Amy, can you you'll take these down?
Sorry, I thought it was on. So my thought after listening to this is I'd still like to hear from the Dummerston folks that I know are meeting and coming up with things. I'd like to hear one more time from them specifically. Come forward if there's a group that's meeting that's not Dummerston folks that think that they have a suggestion that's very concrete. I'd like to hear from them too, what it is that's different than what we have proposed. But I don't want to hear comments. I want to hear specifics of exactly what it is for a structure that you think works.
Okay.
That's my final thing I want to hear before I say, okay, this is it, we go forward. That's me.
I would like on the agenda the pros and cons of how Dummerston is listed in a merger. So financial and practical. Okay, anything else?
I'm also thinking of questions that we kind of had for Chris Leopold, and he wasn't here. If there's
So
any follow-up on legal stuff.
So I'm actually going to suggest that we invite, if we can really refine some questions now, I'd prefer to invite him to our next meeting rather than have a meeting and then invite him for the following meeting. I'd like to get it, if that works for everyone. So does that make sense? Yeah, so either come up with questions right now or come up with questions in the next several days that we can put out to him so he can prep. Obviously, he would have to be available on the 11th, so the 12th. So if he's not available on the 12th, I'll see if he's available, or I'll ask Lyle to see if he's available on the 10th.
Or maybe he can send them to us, send answers.
He can, but I think at this stage in our process, it would be really great to have him in the hot seat.
So the question I have legal, I think that's out there, is the question that really wasn't addressed tonight of how can we strengthen, if there's anything more we can do for the leadership councils, and that fine line that we've been trying to walk all along of giving them power, but not creating another structure underneath that voids or nulls the law.
Right, so that might come to him helping us looking at a draft of what, people would be voting on, whether 15 was in the warning.
And I think it comes under these articles of what we did for Leadership Council, whether there's anything specific that anybody, particularly those who keep complaining that they don't have enough teeth, if you have specific things that you wanted that Leadership Council to do, that we could say to Chris, is this legal?
Okay. Any other questions from the committee for the items for the agenda? So my last thought before I open it up to you folks, if you have any questions or comments, and then we'll round it up from this side of the table, is we all need to look at board dates, because I do know that last summer when we were trying to get things done, boards do not always meet frequently during the summer. And if we want boards to actually, and they need to be participating in the final run, the sort of run to the finish, we need to make sure they're meeting and reviewing so that we get input, okay? All right, so is it okay if I open it up to the public and then we'll...
Can you explain on that? So you would want the boards to have met before, if we meet in July 12th, you were thinking of a board comments back to you before August?
That's what I think we're talking about, unless we have this next meeting, of course, who knows how that meeting's going to end, what we're going to decide.
Currently, Brattleboro doesn't meet again until August 22nd or something.
Right, so you're going to have to meet earlier. We can't sort this out for you now. I do know what we heard from Donna is that she needs it by the very end of August.
Sounds like we need to get something pulled together and talk amongst our boards by no later than, say, the 26th or 27th of July, so we can meet.
So,
We meet that week there.
right, so that's why I'm throwing out to board members who are at the table to hunker down and put this in. So I don't want to determine the dates now because that could take a lot of time, but that's something that needs to be done. All right, I'm going to open it up to you guys. Hopefully we can keep it short with you guys and here so we can end in a few minutes. Does anyone have anything? Okay, so just 2 people? So 3. 3? Okay. You're going to need a mic. So if you're speaking, it's good for you guys to have a mic, and you might want to walk over and grab it. Yeah.
It's not long enough. Okay. Hi, everybody. Ines McGillian from Dummerston. I have a lot of concerns because listening to Brad James and Donna Russo-Savage, they've made a compelling case for waiting on whether we should merge. Donna Russo-Savage hit the nail on the head when she said, you might want to think twice about giving your ability to hire teachers to the SU level, because then you lose local control over hiring at your school. Brad James has told us that we have very little data on what the results of these mergers are. And I think it's going to be very difficult to talk to Jill about what the alternatives are and what we should be trying to achieve when we don't even know if merger is going to achieve what we think we want out of Act 46. So for me, until I see data, I really want to know how other districts do before we really consider merger. The incentives aren't worth it.
George Carver from Brattleboro. You wanted suggestions. What's the mechanism to get them to you? That's my question. Mail them to somebody, email us, bring them to the meeting. What do you want me to do? Okay.
Or you have your Brattleboro representatives. And either way is fine.
I'm just asking a technical
Yeah,
question.
and all the contact information is on the WSESU website.
Email works?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Paul Narmando again. Alice, this question is directed to you in terms of, you had suggested that Dummerston be made advisable. And is it just because Dummerston has been the most outspoken community with respect to the study committee? With respect to, we've tried to make suggestions as to things that we wanted in the Articles of Agreement. They weren't accepted by the committee, and, I accept the committee's decision. But, there may be other towns that are going to vote this down that would be interested in voting it down. We don't know, or maybe I suspect the study committee does not know the sentiment that lies in the various communities. There have been very, very few people who have attended study committee meetings and or public forums. So, I just wanted to question you why you feel, you want to make us advisable because you feel we're going to vote it down.
So I have no interest in actually being advisable. I haven't really given that thought, but what's obvious is that
Well, okay, that was a suggestion that I came away with, so thank you.
No, my suggestion is that right now we're coming up with agenda topics, and that's clearly one from the folks in Dummerston. They're interested in us talking further about that. We've talked about it, and we'll talk about it again. In the agenda, no doubt, we will be talking about if Dummerston is advisable, whether we would want to go ahead and do that, and if we were to go ahead and consider that option, whether we would consider that option for any of the other towns. So that's just one element of an agenda which will no doubt be packed. Okay. Yep. If it's quick, we're trying to finish up.
Normando. One of the things that is really upsetting to Dummerston, and I think even to Guilford, and maybe even to Putney, the Putney town, is the fact that there is nothing in there that the town gets to vote on a school closure or losing our 7th and 8th graders. And I think that is really taking away our democracy, and it should be in the articles. So I would like to revisit that article.
If anyone on the committee wants to revisit that article, you can speak to that now or send me an email about that. I see no need to revisit that topic. We've revisited that topic several times, but certainly that's a topic that Jody Normando and some other folks feel passionately about, and if you want to, again, just shoot me an email before I set the agenda. Okay.
Other districts have that in their articles of agreement.
Thank you, Jody. All right. Anything else from you guys? Yep.
So you know already that I'm the one who wrote a ton there for the closure, and then we've taken it back out and tried to go along with what Chris Leopold said, and we've looked at this a million times over, right? I have no problem with having a vote. I have a problem with giving veto power to the town. I actually like the idea of a vote for the town, so I'm okay with putting that on the agenda and discussing. But and I think I wrote that originally, that the town got a vote, because I like hearing from the town. I think that's absolutely appropriate. But I do not believe that one town of X percent of the entire group gets to say to everybody else, we make a decision. That's been my issue the entire time. So I don't know, I'm trying to read this here at the same time, and I think that might have been one thing that was in there once, Beth, you and I looked at this, and I think it's out at the moment, and I think maybe Chris had something to do with that. So perhaps that can be on the agenda for Chris to talk about again.
We can do it once again. Do remember, if you review all the agendas, we've talked significantly about that, probably 3 times, if not 2. But it's something people feel strongly about, so we can do so. Yep. Okay. We're ending the meeting, actually. No, you can talk to her about it later. Okay, is there anything else from you guys? Again, email me if you want something on the agenda pretty soon. I don't know if Barb is going to be taking a vacation at some point, but ideally, at least a week before I set the agenda would be good.
And I'd like
Okay.
to have the website in time this time. It wasn't on the website in time this time.
Okay. I saw it up there, so I will have to pursue that. Okay, is there a thank you guys coming out for a lovely, is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No, all right, thank you guys.